Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew, and tonight I'd like to welcome three awesome guests, maybe four. On your top left there is Charlie Robinson, the author of The Octopus of Global Control. And then at your bottom left, we have Jeff Doherty, the Christian whistleblower. And then we have Jay Campbell, founder of TOT Revolution and Decoders of Truth on Facebook and YouTube. How are you guys doing tonight?
Awesome, man.
Well, great. Glad to be here. So you've got two awesome guests and me. So, and I'm the artist formerly known as the Christian whistleblower.
The artist formerly known. Yes.
Yeah, I was trying to think of if I should say the artist formerly known or not, but there you go. Well, thank y'all for joining us tonight. I got a lot to talk about. First, I'd like to talk about the difficulties of being awake in a world where everyone else is asleep. It's difficult. It starts with conversations with people, everything from that to trying to grocery shop for food that won't poison you. Myself, I know very few people that are awake, maybe me, my wife, and one or two other people around me. And I find it very difficult, just basically to have conversations with people, let alone anything else, maintaining a relationship with people who are basically asleep. It's really hard. Do you guys find the same difficulties in your life? Let's start with Charlie.
Yeah, for sure. I'm always surprised when I meet somebody that is awake. It's like, it's like meeting like a leprechaun or something. You're like, oh my God, seriously? You know about this stuff too? And they're like, yeah. I've heard about this. You're like, God, where have you been? I feel like the majority of the people that I know, to some extent, understand that what we're seeing is not reality. The things we see on the nightly news are a bit off, but I don't know that they really understand the magnitude of how completely out of whack things are and how we're getting lied to and hit from every single angle. So it's rare that I find someone that's sort of on that level of awakening, because let's face it, it's a daunting task to kind of, once you start to figure out part of it, you have a decision to make. Am I going to dig deeper and find out something that I might not like? Or am I just going to say, well, I'm going to go back to sleep and what am I going to do to change this anyway? So what's the point? So I can understand how people might physically or mentally check out of that process, because it's a lot to unpack. But at the same time, I lose a little bit of respect for people that understand that things are screwed up, but then throw their hands up and say, I refuse to do anything about it.
Right. Very good. Jeff, how you feel?
Well, to be frank with you, I don't find it difficult at all. But then again, I'm an asshole, so it doesn't really matter to me. And if you really don't, I just, because I've been in this long enough now. I spent 20 years as a Pentecostal preacher. I spent another almost 20 years. It's been about 37 years total in, the world of spirituality. And I'm really at the place, like my buddy Derek Rose, a global witness, says, at this point, I really don't care what they think or what they say. And if somebody says they're going to kill me, well, here, just let me draw the line right on my neck for where you're going to cut. So I know it's probably not a real healthy attitude. And tonight, maybe I'm a little bit more turned up than I am other nights, but I don't let it bother me anymore, because I just am who I am, and I don't really care what other people think. So I don't deal with that so much. And I know that's a terrible answer, but you caught me in a very honest moment.
I'll just jump in because I'm next. I actually, the reason that Jeff and I are partnered is because we have the exact same viewpoint.
Because we're both a-holes.
Everybody who knows me as fuck you. Well, actually, let me go back in two ways. And Jeff knows my story much better, but 15 years ago, people did know me as fuck you, pay me. Okay, so I was a low conscience, super ego, all about the money, blah, 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 blah. So now I'm not that. I'm the consciously aware, spiritually attaining or seeking enlightenment, but still have the attitude that, listen, we're in a world where 95% of people are in survival programming. They don't have the time nor the resources nor the aptitude to do the the things that a lot of us focus on. So I get it. And that's ultimately why I don't care. You know what I mean? I seriously don't care. I know we both just swore and Jeff sent a message and stuff like that. We won't swear or us on the podcast, but as you guys know, sometimes you use, strong language to point a tone of inflection, which is important because we are in a time right now where, in my opinion, there's great change going on, and it's going on behind the scenes. It's going on interdimensionally, multidimensionally, in our skies, beyond our ability to see and our limited, prisms that we can see from. But it is important that we continue to share our truths and that we do put this information out there. And obviously you guys know this too. And this might be a point that you want to talk about, Chris, tonight. It's also not our right to spiritually try to make others aware or enlighten or to raise, up. And that's where I think a lot of us in this quote unquote truth aware community get confused because we want to, in our hearts, help people see the light. We want people to understand that, like, dude, are you serious? You don't see this, you don't get it, but it's not our job. All we can do is disseminate the information as best as we understand it. And if someone wants to take that information and go places with it and read and research and do all the things that all of us have done most of our lives, then that's on them. But it's like, Gerald Clark, and I know you just had an awesome show with him, by the way, Chris. I watched the whole thing. That might have been one of Gerald's best shows, by the way. Great job on that.
Thank you.
But it's just like Gerald says, it's, he interviewed that guy Ponzin, whatever his first name is, I forget, but it's spiritual violence to attempt to awaken others. It's not our right. You can't do it. All you can do is put this information out, disseminate it, and what happens is what happens, and people have a choice. That's it.
Now I'm even more upset because I can't get Gerald on my show.
I'll get him to come on. He doesn't want to come on shows, dude. How did you get him to come on the show, by the way?
Well, I talked to Matt LaCroix. I'd have him on a couple of times, and he was my kind of window in there. So
nice.
And I started talking to Gerald, and we had
Congratulations.
But it was really good, dude. Like, I've had many conversations with Gerald, and he went really deep down the rabbit hole. He's obviously evolved his thinking in a lot of ways.
I can tell because I used to listen to some of his old podcasts, and I can definitely, it was an amazing show. And like you said, that we're being attacked. There's not only a spiritual attack, there's a physical attack, and there's an attack on the youth of today, on our kids.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's coming a lot from the technology, from the cell phones they have, from the TV that they're watching, from the shows, from everything that's being bombarded on them, not to mention the crap they're eating and the air they're breathing. I have kids, and I'm terrified about their future. What do you guys think about the assault on, basically the youth of today?
Let me, if you guys, is it okay if I go first on this? Because I want to share a screenshot with you guys real quick that's so epic and so relevant and something that Jeff and I did not do last night, but I want to share this with you guys. So this is, hopefully, do you guys see that? Is it showing up?
We see your Zoom screen.
Oh, for sure. It's not letting me. Oh, there it is. Do you guys see that now?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one of the tarot cards, the new tarot cards that came out. Now, I have a really good friend. His name is, what is his name? Gunther, and I can't think of his last name. But anyway, he's on my Twitter feed, and we became really good friends. He's very knowledgeable. He runs a huge hedge fund that's for aware people, if you can believe it. And they're raising aware capital. They're gonna try to bring basically responsible farming, ecologically responsible living, and all this stuff in the new age when all of this collapses, which we're going to talk about here, obviously, at some point in this podcast. But look at this. So this is the two divergent populations. So on the left, we have believe in the power of technology. So this is like on Jeff's show and my show all the time. We always talk about chip me, the transhumanists. This is what the globalists, the Hillary lovers, whatever you want to call them, the cabal, the transhumanists, this is what they want. And then on the other side, you have restore Earth's environment, which is people like us, for enlightenment, for spirituality, for preserving our human, portions. And here it is right here. They call it the Knave of the Pentacles, the Gaia hypothesis. So, I mean, again, it's all right there in front of us. But, I wanted to share that with you guys. Let me stop sharing. I wanted to share that with you guys to see that the people that are, I use that term liberally, whoever is shaping us from behind the scenes is already putting forth what is to come. Now, that doesn't mean we can't change the timelines like what we talked about last night. But if you go back and you look at all these people that study the tarot cards, they've always been there. As you know, Jeff, Pinella puts in his book in the Divine Secret Garden, he puts the tarot card. That's his big gotcha at the end of his books. And his thesis is, they've already told you that the tape runs out, So it's like, if this is a simulation, and back to your original question, Chris, we are at war. I just did a podcast with this guy, Dr. Anthony J., and brilliant guy, amazing. And he wrote this book, Estrogeneration. He's a Mayo Clinic researcher on estrogen. And, Jeff and I talk about this on every single show we do. You guys, I'm not kidding you. When you see the data, it's over. You mentioned, Chris, you fear for your kids. I have 8 and 10-year-old daughters too. I don't know about you, Charlie. I'm sure you have children. I know Jeff's got grown children. I've got non-biologicals that are older too. But the war is already over. This is not me being negative. They have already desecrated our environment. They have created plastic byproducts, all these things, again, estrogeneration, as he calls them, that are so caustic to our survival as human beings that I don't really see a future. Like, the future is very dystopian. The only way, and again, Jeff always comes at me, the only way that I see a future is we have some form of divine intervention, because they have destroyed the planet. And Gaia, Mother Earth, whatever you want to call her, Sophia, she is going to rebel at some point, as she has always done, and takes this place back. And that's where we're at right now. It's like, I look around and I look at this as like the end times. This is the fall of Rome. This is the fall of Atlantis. It's for people like us who are aware, this is what is obvious to me.
That reminds me of a bit George Carlin did, where he talks about, who knows, maybe our purpose on this earth was that the earth needed plastic, and they needed us to make plastic for it. So yeah, and I put that in my book, that we are treating this planet like we have another one to go to.
Exactly.
And I guess maybe that segues into the secret space program. We'll talk about that another time. But seriously, our behavior in this planet, whether it's the people that started it in advance and we sort of picked up on it, our behavior towards this planet's reprehensible. I mean, we should be ashamed of ourselves, and we will. History is littered with punishment coming for this sort of behavior in some form or fashion. And yeah, we've been poisoned. Like you said, they're getting us from every direction, getting us from the air, definitely getting us in the food. And, and through television predictive programming, the computer, iPads and things like that. Yeah, I have a 7-year-old daughter. I struggle with this, with what's it going to be like, and you see Steve Jobs talking about it, saying, I would never let my kids play on one of these devices. And you're like, dude, you're making them. You're making billions of them, and you wouldn't let your kids play. Like, tell us more about that. That might be some information that maybe your marketing department doesn't want to get out, but I think that's relevant information for us, something we might want to know a little bit about. But yeah, I feel like we're up against it from every single direction. But the first and most important step that we can take early on is just to at least make other people aware, not to preach necessarily, but just to in case you're not already noticing that we're screwing up the planet, like let's try and make people aware of our behavior. Start with ourselves first, like clean up our own act, and then work outward from there.
Yeah, Charlie, I just want to echo that, because December of last year, I weighed about 65 pounds more than I do right now, and I was on my way to becoming another one of these people. And I've learned this from Jay. Basically, males are being taken down by video games, and females are being taken down by social media.
Yes.
And I think that probably one of the keys to it, and we don't think about this because we're all, we used to say in the church, so heavenly minded that we're of no earthly good. And Wayne is coming on to this as well, because I find that if you get yourself on a path of physical optimization, I know this is Jay's department, and it's directly related to Jay that I've lost the 65 pounds in the best shape of my life. But as you get yourself into physical optimization, it's so much easier to get yourself into spiritual optimization. And I think that, as Charlie was saying, one of the keys is to just slap yourself and wake yourself up and get yourself into some physical optimization, which is naturally going to lead to spiritual optimization. Because until you get yourself right, and until you get back in contact with the earth and walk on some grass, walk on some sand, and realize that this, and you can realize that the natural world is there, and you can realize the artificial world is there. But until we wake up and quit going through drive-throughs and get ourselves, keep ourselves from being drugged by the food that we eat. I'm with Jay. I don't know if there's any help, but thankfully I can see those two waves. And interestingly enough, 30 years ago, I was preaching in Pentecostal churches about two rivers running in different directions. I saw it differently then, but there really is going to be a declination of humanity and an ascension of humanity. And I think we're seeing it played out before our very eyes.
Not a doubt. What's up, Wayne?
Hey, how you doing? Sorry I was a little late. I defied the laws of the space-time continuum.
Wait a minute, I thought you just already moved us back. It's
I tell you what, no, it's spinning back there somewhere. And I did it without breaking any traffic laws, so we're good.
Nice
Very
work.
good, Wayne, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
We were actually just talking about the assault on the youth of today from every angle, from technology, from the cell phones they have in their hands that they won't drop, video games, media, television, the food they eat, the air they breathe. I mean, I have kids. I'm frightened for their future. How do you feel about that?
I think, and it's just my hypothesis, that these Black Mirror devices are having a much more dramatic effect on our youth than what we ever thought.
Yep.
I think we're talking soul stealing here.
Absolutely.
So that's just my take on it.
Yeah.
Because if you've been in an airport, it's freaking zombie zone out there.
Everywhere. we actually, you guys, we play games. Jeff knows this. We play games when we go to the restaurant. And we go with Monica's dad, who's 72 years old, and no one's allowed to bring their phone into it's a Sunday night meals. No one's allowed to bring their phone. And so we'll sit there and we'll just look around and people watch and just watch and see if we catch anyone that's like us. And it's almost impossible to find it today.
No.
Yeah.
No. And taking picture of your food. Where did that come from?
All of it. Oh, everything. Jeff said it. Jeff said it right. Social media has slaughtered women. Women sit on the toilet. We all know our wives or our girlfriends, and they go like this. It's the most amazing thing. And then with the boys, as Jeff said it right on the nails too, they're literally playing video games. And Jeff knows this again too, because we've talked about this on our show, but I've talked to people that are big time researchers in estrogen, both men and women, and they can tell you guys that the downstream effects of birth control pills in the last 30 years in the water table have caused the youth of today to be such a mess. And when I say a mess, Jeff hit it on the nail, right on the head. We have men that have absolutely no hormone output. These kids, 18, 20, 22, 23 years old, they have low testosterone, they have high estrogen, they are zombies, they have no drive, no determination, no focus. And again, this is not them. This is not, I used to be like, well, what happened? Why do people lack drive? This has all been engineering. The elites have known that this was going to be downstream effects. You'll hear people, they'll say, oh, well, those are secondary and it's just the byproduct of modernization. No, it's not. Okay, they had knowledge of this 30 and 40 years ago when they started doing this. Monsanto, they suppress all the studies. We know it. And again, like I said, when I talked to this guy, he's one of the leading researchers in the world from the Mayo Clinic. And he's like, dude, I can't even have a conversation with the top research scientist at the place about estrogen in the water supply, about plastics, about all these things, because they won't talk about it. They're not allowed to comment because they get their money and their funding cut off like that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. We know that this has all been engineered and planned. Everyone else is pretty much oblivious to that they have engineered this entire thing. It's all been planned. And what kind of a person does this? What kind of a psychopath signs off on these type of things that we experience every day and that has been planned? I mean, what do who is behind, what kind of psychopaths are behind this? And I know it may go off world, but let's talk about that. Whoever wants to chime in first.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say non-humans, anybody can come after me on that.
Yeah. I don't think there's a question anymore. We used to have the question, is there a they out there? Is there a cabal? Is there an Illuminati? Is there a group that is actively and coordinatedly working behind the scenes to bring down humanity and to cause our dumbing down and to turn us into a herd? Are there really controllers of the matrix? Is the fear and guilt control matrix run by someone? I don't think that's a question anymore. There's no doubt that there is a fear and guilt control matrix. There's no doubt that there's some type of people or entities that are running it. And really the only question now is trying to identify who it is and what to do about it, in my humble opinion.
Well said.
Yeah, they have been pretty upfront about wanting two classes of people, the gods and the clods,
Right.
And if people are unsure about that, they can just watch and see how little respect the people running the show have for humanity. They treat us like they don't care, and that's because they don't care. And in fact, not only that, people have talked about how the emergence of autism is not accidental, and that it creates almost like an automatron humanoid that is able to do repetitive tasks like work in a factory, but not able to excel to the point that they would ever be any threat to the controller. So they're not going to be a threat either economically. They're not going to go start their own companies. They're just going to be sort of like just a notch below everybody else, which is awful and sad, and it's horrifying. And how dare they? And all these things are terrible. But it's not accidental. We see that this has been engineered and it's been planned, and so if that's the plan, then where does it stop? It doesn't show any signs of stopping anytime soon. It looks, there's no reason to think that they're just going to grow a conscience overnight and stop all this madness. And we have to sort of, understand that there's that the plan is ongoing, and what we're seeing right now is bad, and it has the potential to get a whole lot worse.
Yeah. And what was the name of the life form that was created in the Babylonian, the Anunnaki tales? When the Gigi rebelled, they created that other life form to do the work. What were they called?
The Adapa.
The Adapa, right. And that's kind of like what Charlie was describing. It's the same thing all over again. And if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Wayne?
Well, two thoughts I have on it is, number one, I think we should step back and see why the sudden influx of souls that are coming into this planet. And I think, too, in my studies that I've been really getting into, particularly Hermes, is when you do comparison studies to what you can see, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Quran, whatever the sacred book is, it appears that we may, in fact, be at an end of an age.
We are.
And the archons realize that their worst nightmare is coming to pass. And it's been prophesied by the one God, source, whoever we want to call it, that the plan of his plan cannot be completed until mankind takes his rightful position next to him.
Right.
And I think that is what we're seeing, because the influx of souls, no one talks about it. Our planet is being absolutely over-flooded with new souls.
Right. Right.
Where are they coming from? Even if you believe in reincarnation, it would not account for the influx of what we're seeing here. I think we're getting ready to see an event.
I told Jeff that in a text message, Jeff, an hour ago? I feel it in my bones now. Something's about to happen significantly, and I'm not talking like 5-10 years from now. I mean now. Yeah. I mean, we're about to see something. I mean, obviously Trump's been warning. September is National Preparedness Month. He created a constitutional act, written in. There's something coming. I mean, obviously we know we all have QAnon, crazy people supporting it and giving us information and all that. And whether it's disinfo or real or not, or truth with error, I'm sure it's all of those things. But something is coming.
And I'll tell you that something else, if you looked at it, came out this morning on the Wall Street Journal. Our government is spending money at a rate that I don't know where it's going. I mean, we're spending money at a rate that it's impossible to pay back, which says they don't intend to pay it back.
No, they don't. No, they don't. No,
they don't.
And by the way, that's funny that you say that, Wayne, because as Jeff and I have talked about, like the biggest financial analyst that I follow in the whole world, and I've been following him forever, is John Malden. And John Malden, who is in his late 60s, old school stodgy financial guy, literally says in his prognostication, the only hope for humanity, again, this is a very supported Wall Street guy, that we have a complete reset, that everything has to go to zero. All debt has to be absolved. All foreign nations, individuals, Fortune 50 companies, everything has to go to zero because it's impossible to, like you said, pay it back. It's not even a calculable number. But to me, what you're saying though also indicates that the elites, whoever they are, know that what is coming is like what you said. It's not going to be ever needed to be paid back because something is going to happen and they don't care. And they're just raping and looting and pillaging as they did in 2007 and 2008.
And we have a president now. I don't think there's any coincidence that we have a president that's known as the king of debt. And I don't know what the real answers are, but I'm convinced that back there on that whiteboard over Wayne's shoulder, there's the Steiger code in there, and I think all the answers are right in there if we could just decipher that.
It'll take too long for him to.
Yeah, it's Wayne's World too.
Well, if you think about it,
no, go ahead, Charlie.
If there is an event coming, if there's something that they know is on its way, and you think like them, and you work backwards, what would you do if you knew an event was coming? One of the things you would do is you'd have to control the narrative. So
Yes.
that would mean silencing anybody that would potentially offer a counter narrative to that. So that might explain why you see the silencing of the people on YouTube and Facebook and all these platforms to deplatform people in advance of something coming. Because if I was a crazy maniac trying to pull off something like this, that's what I'd want to do. I'd want to make sure those people were out of the picture. I mean, not so much because they're going to say something to their listeners or followers that's going to be, a counter narrative, but that those followers will then go put it on Facebook and influence people that don't know anything about it. That they would be their first time hearing about something like this. So they understand that the people that are listening to Alex Jones and watching alternative media and everything, the first thing they're going to do is say false flag, or they're going to pick it apart. But and there's nothing they can really do for those people except maybe throw them in FEMA camps or something like that. But that's not the concern. And I think that they're probably more concerned about the friends and associates in the next circle around those people that they could influence. They could go on Facebook and say, hey, listen, man, this is a classic false flag, and let me tell you why, blah, blah, blah. So, they're taking these people out of the arena in advance of something. That's just my opinion on it.
It's a good thing they love us so much, as Rex would say if he were here.
Yeah, very much so.
I think it's the Georgia Guidestones. I mean, I think that in the higher realms that the defense is going to be of these, whoever it is, the archons, whoever, that their defense is going to say, well, we told them.
Absolutely. They told us everything blatantly in movies, in media.
They said it last night,
the
Jeff.
Georgia Guidestones. I did there's a show on my channel, a personal visit to the Georgia Guidestones, shameless plug. So I think you're right, Wayne.
Yeah.
They have to. It's part of the rule. We talked about it last night. That's part of the rule, that the enunciation of what is coming or what has happened or what will happen is part of the rule of third dimensional reality that we exist in.
Now, Jay, you had mentioned Q and QAnon earlier. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that we really have this group of supposed white hats that are fighting against, the evils, or are just trying to, be basically whistleblowers? Do you think this is a real phenomenon, or just a bunch of, kids in their basement that think they're doing something?
I think the best answer, and all these guys will give good answers on this, I know, but the best answer is, again, look at what we live in. We live in a simulated reality. This is the Matrix. We also know that in a third dimensional existence, it is duality, right? So you have good and evil, night and day, white and black. So ultimately, everything is a part of one thing and a part of the other. It's, again, the as above, so below. I mean, yes, there's definitely some contingent of Anons, because, Derek Rose, Global Witness, who's part of the Anon community, can confirm. Just as Anonymous, when they were doing their things before Occupy Wall Street, were legit. But then ultimately, because of the cabal and their octopus, tentacles everywhere, and they're Google eye in the sky, and they're listening. I mean, I'm sorry, I won't swear, but I mean, the reality is that they do corrupt and co-opt eventually everything. So yes, some of QAnon was probably intel from quote unquote white hat military that quote unquote do support Trump. Is Trump good? Well, is he good now? Is he evil later? As our friend John Pinella says. I mean, who knows? I mean, again, I just know that everything is truth with error. You're going to have some people that will support Trump as the white hat, good guy, saving the world, taking down Hillary and the cabal and all of these people. And then you'll have other people just say, like Derek says, and this is the greatest thing ever, is Trump is just the new cabal.
Yeah, I need to get Derek on.
Well, Trump is good for business, so vote Republican in 2020.
I think my concern is I used to be a lobbyist at one time, and I still know some people. My concern is that we're living in a fake illusionary reality here. I think we have two governments, and it's not being discussed. I don't hear it discussed anywhere, and so hopefully Christie will not get kicked off. But here's the point. You see what was voted in an administration taking place, but there's very evident of another government that is also running. And the event with John Kerry being over in Iran, talking with the mullahs, completely outside his authority or even legal right. So this is, to me, danger signs everywhere. Kerry fucked up. I'll just be very honest with you. And because he exposed this counter government that's running.
Wayne, I don't think I've ever heard you drop an F-bomb before. That might be
that's a first for me too.
Yeah, sorry about that. It bothers me a lot, folks, because it's not being talked about. And it got passed off into the news as no big deal. But when you read this, he's been over there 5 different times. So this is not just a friendly visit. This is obviously a coordinated back channel negotiation going on. And the problem I'm asking, who is Kerry representing?
Yeah.
The same
great
people
question,
who was representing in Antarctica.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's a great question, Wayne. And of course, John Kerry did receive the Emmy for the best gospel hair for a non-gospel performer. But
why do I think of Jimmy Swaggart on this? I don't know.
With all of this going on, gentlemen, I still can't help but be the last of the eternal optimists, because the more energy weapons that get directed at us, the more subtle weaponry that gets directed at us, the more 5G, the more that they try to do with the mind control, the more they try to do. I just see them as absolutely terrified and trying to copy artificially the things that we have naturally, the spiritual powers that we have, the energetic powers that we have. And I've got to believe there's a reason why they're trying to copy the reality that we have. And I think from the work of the people on this panel and other people like us, I still believe, I'm telling you there's a chance, I still believe that we're going to be able to turn this thing around. And at the end of the day, not everybody's going to make it, but I think there's going to be some of us that are going to fall into this pile of you-know-what and come out smelling like roses. I really believe.
Before you go, Charlie, just a point of emphasis of what you're saying is all of the great texts, all of the ancient texts have said this. Okay, that a contingent will ascend. And again, we don't even know what ascend means. You and I and all of us like to think it's for those of us who have done the work. We're living the spiritual practices, forgiveness, loving, all these different things we all talk about all the time. But no one really knows. But they've all talked about this precession of the equinox, this converging of time where, it's the galactic event, whatever it is. Anyway, go ahead, Charlie.
Well, I mean, I remember seeing that picture of John Kerry and his wife having dinner with Bashar Assad and his wife in a restaurant in Damascus, and clearly they were getting together and chatting about what was going to be happening. This was maybe 7-8 years ago. Of course, so when you get to be somebody like John Kerry, when you rise to this level of power, inside the United States government, and you come out of Skull and Bones and places like that. I mean, you don't rise to a position of strength and power without being compromised in some way, shape, or form. So who is John Kerry working for? He's working for whoever has the dirt on him. And I would imagine at this point it's several organizations because he's about as dirty as they come. I do remember that one, I don't know if he was testifying for Congress or something. He had just, I mean, I hope for his sake it was just Botox he had, but he was licking his lips like crazy. He looked like a wooden Indian there. And of course I've seen videos where they slow it down and they just, put green scales on him and make him look like a lizard, with the tongue licking and everything. But listen, when you start your college career by joining Skull and Bones, I mean, you're in it. That's your life. You're in it. And I'm sure he knows the consequences of not being in it. And understanding like whether you join Skull and Bones or MS-13. I mean, you're in it, and there's two ways out: death or prison. And I think for guys like that, prison's not even an option anymore because they know too much. So
that's very well said. I think it stands to reason that we all together, and Jeff, you know this because there's a guy on Twitter who just showed up about 2 months ago, Jeff, named Deke. And what's his last name? I can't think of it, but you guys got to start following this Twitter account. This guy,
I think it's Savage, isn't it? Is it Deke
Savage? This guy is putting up information on Twitter that is absolutely mind-blowing, and it's on the hour. It is like a total decoding. And he says, and has positioned many links to many deep in-bed articles online, that every single top-flight celebrity and Politico has been cloned. And that you will never know who is who, if it's the real person, and also if they've actually killed the real person and replaced them with a clone. And you guys, and Jeff knows this, cloning is 100% accomplished. I know people that they totally mapped the human genome in 1972. Okay, so that's 50 years ago almost. I mean, come on. Of course they've cloned. Of course they have other top secret, you guys, black ops specs, technology where they're doing stuff. So it's like, why wouldn't you do that, right? Like, how would you keep people under your control without, the risk of being compromised unless you cloned them? And then the same thing with Hollywood celebrities.
Yeah, I've seen some very interesting pictures of the celebrities that were supposedly cloned. And I mean, they got some convincing pictures and information out there about that.
Well, look at Eminem. Look at Eminem. He's clearly a clone. That's not even the real guy anymore. Marshall Mathers, I mean, it's like again, you're right. You can go and you can do all your homework and research and you can prove that these people are not the same.
Right.
Derek Rose, who wasn't a Hollywood insider, managed many stars, was director of development or something for Paramount for many years, has blatantly said and very clearly said on several occasions that anyone and everyone that you know of in Hollywood is thoroughly and completely compromised. There's no question about it. It's just, like Charlie was saying, who runs them. So everyone's compromised. And I just want to say officially that I am not a clone. And like Charlie was saying, about joining these clubs, I agree with Mark Twain. I wouldn't join any club that would have me as a member, and we've got to get ourselves independent, sovereign, and free.
And Charlie, you had mentioned the censorship earlier, how they're really ramping up right now. I mean, I read an article that they're going to start fact-checking pictures and videos on Facebook before they go up now. I fear that pretty soon we won't even have this platform to use, as a tool anymore. What are your thoughts on the ramping up of this censorship? I mean, Alec Jones is pretty much gone. Not that I really listen to him, but, he's gone now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that censorship of photos and videos is going to go very well. I mean, look, Facebook said they're gonna hire 20,000 fact checkers. So, I wonder what that job interview process is going to look like. I mean, that's ridiculous, because the facts are are different for, depending on who you are. My version of reality might be different from somebody else's. So who's to say that I'm right and they're wrong, or they're right and I'm wrong? So, Facebook has, I'm on it. I'm guilty of that, but it has a very unhealthy effect on people for sure. You start to, you sort of only see the best that people want to put of themselves, whether it be the best moments of their lives, or they want to put, they don't put a video of them tripping and falling on their driveway and breaking their leg. I would if I had one of those, because it'd be funny. But, most people are only putting out the best aspects of their life. And so then everyone's watching this, and then they're getting screwed up in the head because they're like, oh, my life doesn't compare to that person. Well, that guy's life isn't real. It's edited and photoshopped and all this stuff. So, Facebook has been great for a while for a tool for sort of connecting people. But, I think people understand it's been compromised. Even if it's, the compromise has just been in the way of gathering your information and selling it to advertisers. We kind of knew that was the deal we were making when we signed up for it. I don't think we thought it would get to the level where they would be turning your microphone on your cell phone and listening to your conversations, and then advertising cat food if you mention that you have a cat, and stuff like that. But that's what it is. And as somebody with a marketing degree from USC, I can appreciate the marketing aspect of this all, but it's evil. Right. And for Google, who said, whose motto was, don't be evil. They're the most evil of them all, because they've silenced all these voices on YouTube and in the search engines, burying you. So it's turned into a digital book burning, and it's a shame. But that also is a signal, I think, to a lot of people that the alternative media is working, because they wouldn't be freaking out like this if the alternative media was ineffective. If they're ineffective, they would continue to let them go on their way, talk about Bigfoot online, do whatever they want to do. Who cares? You guys aren't having the impact. But their reaction to people, their reaction to social media, and their reaction to YouTube and places like that, where they're clamping down, shows that they're legitimately freaked out about this. And, they talked about this in 2016 at the Bilderberg convention. They talked about how they wanted to usher in an internet ID. And that is going to be a huge problem. That's a wet dream of these globalist maniacs, because what they don't like is the anonymity online. Right. Yes, they can pull IP addresses and figure it out that way. But more than anything, they would like to what you're watching at all times, because then they can, if they decide to want to take it to the next level, and it would be like the social media platform that the Chinese are rolling out, where they give you a score as what type of citizen you are. It doesn't get any much more Orwellian than that. And that is, unfortunately, we may think that that's not coming. It's coming, but it'll be rolled out in a way that we will think it's a benefit to us. Right. And we'll be begging for it. And that has me alarmed.
It's true.
It's THX 1138. Have you ever seen the movie?
Yeah. Welcome to it. This is I've heard it said before, but I didn't know that 1984 was an instruction manual,
Yeah, no doubt. Well, people, let's go. You got to that. And maybe that's one of your points, Chris. If it's not, we should talk about it. People have never been dumber. We have a technology, all of this ubiquitous access to everything. But because the human condition is to be lazy, especially now with all these young people having access to everything, never struggling, never wanting, never having to earn anything, we have just created this human central computer, and IQ is going down. And Jeff and I talk about this on our show all the time. This is a fact, by the way. I'm not just making this up. I've talked to researchers. The average IQ, this is how crazy it was. The average IQ today knew what a ninth grader knew in 1984. So the average college graduate today knew what a ninth grader knew in 1984. So imagine where we've gone in just 30 years or 40 years to be that low. And again, we know what the answer is, right? No one does the work. They Google the information, they get bits, blocks, and bytes, and regurgitate it, and it's gone the next day. No one learns anything. They don't learn anything. And they're pushed through school, public, even private. As long as you pay, you graduate. It's all nuts.
So by that definition, which I agree, is that we now have Generation Z who basically have no spiritual ambition, which means, according to Hermes, if you look at the Hermetica, says that their souls die.
Yeah, no doubt.
So they pass into adolescence and into adulthood with no soul.
And they die from emaciation.
Well, literally, yeah. Yeah, spiritually, yeah. And that's going to reflect. You know, it's like that book, 1 Second After. You know, when the bomb hits, you know, we're out where I live, and I'm sure you gentlemen are much the same in suburbia. You know, you start closing down the grocery stores, and in 3 days, you've got anarchy.
It's over.
Yeah.
Less than that.
Yeah.
Plus, Wayne, think of all the people, you guys know this, Jeff and I talk about this too. All the 60% of people in the United States today are on a prescribed mood-altering drug. Think about that. 3 days, grid goes down, it's Walking Dead. Walking Dead.
I mean, these psychotropic drugs that they have the youth on, I mean, we're literally creating the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde scenario.
Yeah.
I just don't know if the serum.
The masses off their meds, ladies and
Oh my goodness! You want to talk about crazy town?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of the show, I don't see. I mean, again, I know I'm negative when I say it like this, and obviously I have young daughters, so I don't want it to be like this, but I don't see a future beyond 2030. Again, I know what's happening to the estrogenics. I know that the Hebrew University study says by 2042, men will be completely infertile on this planet. They will not be able to propagate the species. So the elites know, and they're trying to make us into this transmogrified, transhumanistic AI, human, you know.
By the way, just to add to that, think about now what we have with the robotic brothels, the sex. No, this is serious.
But who's going to go to them if nobody is fertile or able to maintain?
But that's just the point. In Japan, it's having already a dramatic impact on the men and now the women of their population. And by the way, here in the United States, the sex brothel in Nevada is the most popular thing to have opened up. So now we're taking the one gift the Master God gave us, which is the ability to have the intimacy between male and female. Now we're replacing it with a machine.
Amazing. Literally amazing.
It won't be long before some lady goes to her local sex robot shop, orders a robot that looks exactly like her husband, and says, listen, I just have always wondered what it would be like to throw him in front of a train. You know?
Oh.
So get to the point where it just takes the humanity out of you as well. It's like, hey, forget the sex with it thing. I just wanted to see, I want to see the reaction, you know, of doing all kinds of crazy things to him.
Sounds like our own personal Westworld.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think it's a reality.
That's why they put that show on.
Well,
like you say all the time, men today, I mean, men under 30 years old,
no interest in sex.
They don't even know how to talk to a woman.
No, and they have no interest in sex. I mean, I've got young guys on my real estate team right now. They're out doing calling in our office on the backside of here, and when you talk to them about talking to girls, they'd say, I'd rather play video games and jack off to porn. What is the purpose? I have to deal with women. We all know what women are like. But if I have to deal with that, why can't I just play video games where I get an instant dopamine fix? And then when I'm done with the dopamine fix from the video games, I can just jack off to porn.
Well, I just have to thank God for Head East, you know, the great song, Love Me Tonight, you know. It's like, I don't care where you've been. I don't care who you let in. I'm just saying, you know. I'm sorry, guys. I just grew up in a different era. I mean,
no, all of us, we don't understand it. I mean, I can't imagine what it's not like to chase women or, you know, the P word when I was 20 years old. That's what we all did. I mean, my God.
It makes you a better salesperson, too, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Drive. It gives you incentive. It makes you learn to communicate more effectively. Yeah, there's no question. They have no drive. I always say they have no want to. Because why would you
want to? Absolutely.
Why would you have a want to when you always have everything?
Well,
Well, I put a quote in my book from Dr. Russell Blaylock. He is a neurosurgeon, and he talks about how that there's a intentional dumbing down of society, and that you have a small percentage of people that have it, that can see clearly, but then you have a big mass of people that are just chemically dumbed down to the point where they're just willing to go along with anything. And then what that does is it makes them dependent on the government because they can't excel. So, he talks about how they want that, and that there's a very small percentage that have a high IQ, and that it's obvious that they can see all the angles, they can see how it's played out, and they understand what the game is. But if you're a controller, if you're one of those people up at the top running the game, it would be in your best interest to keep everyone as dumbed down as you could so they couldn't figure it out. And then on top of that, keep them fighting with one another. And then an additional step is if you can get them just stuck in front of their computer all day long, well, then they're never going to be a threat to rise up against you.
I agree. And Jay, earlier you had mentioned that you have this feeling that there's an event coming. And I've had this feeling myself for a long time. And all of this is coinciding with some major earth changes. I mean, we're having some major upheavals and earthquakes, volcanic activity. Our weather patterns are changing. Now, where do you see us going in the next 5 years? Like you said, you don't see us going past 2030. But where do you see humanity going the next 5 or 10 years? And are they intentionally having something to do with these changes we're seeing on Earth? Do you think it's something that's man-made or something outside influence that's causing this?
So Jeff and I talked about this last night on our podcast. If there is a Nibiru, a wormwood, a brown star, a brown dwarf, whatever it is, it's obviously Gerald's talked about, and all the great Anunnaki researchers have talked about. My guess is it's interdimensional, or it's multidimensional. It's not, in a physical time space where we can see it. Maybe you can see it from a different infrared lens or scope or night vision or something where we skew the prism of vision. But if that is it, then I would assume that comes, at the quote unquote every processional 3,600 year. And we don't know. Time is being manipulated, but that would be my guess. But my thoughts are what happens first. And I'm seeing this just from my day-to-day life and business. Real estate in Southern California. If you look at, and by the way, Charlie, are you in SoCal?
I'm in Las Vegas.
Okay, cool. Okay, good. Where in Las Vegas?
I live in Denver. I go back and forth between Denver and Henderson.
Okay, cool. So I lived in Summerlin in Red Rock Country Club. But anyway, so the epicenter of economic movement is kind of in SoCal. If you talk to any analyst anywhere in the world, they'll tell you there's so many different types of business, there's so many foreign capital access, blah blah blah. It goes on and on. So in the last 3 months, real estate industry has completely hit the skids. Today, in this business that I'm involved in, I went and met with one of the biggest doctors in all of Southern California. And he told me in the last 60 to 70 days, shut down too. So I can definitely tell you guys right now, we are already now in the beginning of the descent. And how big this descent is going to be, I don't know. But if I give you statistics, and I'm sure Wayne can back all of this stuff up, we have the highest debt levels in the history of humanity. We have $4 trillion in student loan debt. Even the Fortune 50 companies are levered beyond all description. It's like you said, Wayne, they know that there is an event coming. And what I'm getting at is that there's going to be a financial tsunami, much greater, much more significant than 2008. Now, if you ask, people in the know, they'll say, oh, well, there's restrictions in lending and that can't happen. It's all BS. You can go behind it. It's all organized by Wall Street again. It's the same thing. The same, financial assets. They've changed the words and the acronyms. It's all happening again. It's again, history repeats itself. So my guess is first we have financial collapse. I don't know how significant financial collapse is defined. Does it mean they reset currency? Does it mean we go to what Malden says to zero? I don't know, but that's first. To me, from that, everything else is determined. Because if it's that substantial that we are literally in a zero out situation, then we're going to most likely have instability. I don't know how we can maintain stability, at least, from a global standpoint. I feel like it could go, in different ways. And then, Jeff, you can bring in biblical stuff, then that's when, the cabal could do their other stuff, whether they launch a gigantic false flag, a Project Bluebeam, the Antichrist is coming back, or, Jesus is ascending. I mean, there's so many things they can do with holographic technology. But to me, we are looking at a financial collapse, 100% certainty within 2 years. And my guess is that by this time next year, it will be full blown.
Well, I served with the Fed as a consultant in 2010 on debit card usage, and I can back that up. I mean, the warning signs I saw was in 2000 at the quarterly auction in 2011, February, that when there were no buyers and the Fed stepped in, and of course, most people who are listening to us, that's monetizing the debt.
Exactly.
And the Fed has been monetizing our debt since then. And, it's a shell that has nothing in it.
Exactly. There's zero collateralization.
I think my big concern is have we become so divisive as a nation that when the collapse happens, and the contagion can start in any one of these third tertiary markets that are out there.
Exactly.
My concern is what is going to be the impact on the social aspect? I mean, are we really going to see, the emergence of the blue shirts really becoming what Germany was with the brown shirts?
Right.
Are voices like us going to be silenced in order because the doctrine isn't going to be followed? Now, I'll just add one more to this. When I look at the advancement of AI that they rolled out last week at Reagan Airport, and now it's being rolled out in an additional dozen markets, full facial recognition for boarding.
Yeah. Well, Jeff knows my story, guys. I just came back from China, and China is the play. They are scanning fingers, thumbs, eyes. I mean, it is total Orwellian over there.
That's a police state.
Yeah,
let's just be honest.
It's a police.
And I think that's what we are here. We don't want to admit to it. We want to live in this illusionary thing. But once again, the airports are the first sign of that reality. Mm-hmm. I don't like it when I see TSA agents showing up at football games.
I know.
What's happening here? We had 3 years ago, out in my subdivision, the area that I live in, we had rolling TSA checkpoints.
That's insane, by the way.
What the freak is that about? Federal police?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
I did a chapter in my book on them called Black and Blue and Dumb All Over. And I didn't do myself any favors when I go through security at the airports. I'm not, I'm just hoping that nobody has a copy of the book in their
You're code 11.
Are you Charlie Robinson?
I get the full body cavity search every time I go through there. No, I couldn't help myself. I mean, it was such an easy target, but like it needed to be said. I mean, this was it's security theater at this point. They're not catching, people doing anything. I did see them catch some guy going through the airport with a bag of weed, but I mean, that's in Denver. And he's like, hey, it's legal here. He's like, it's not legal everywhere else. He's like, yeah, well, okay. So I'm just going to take it. So they're taking your weed along with 16 million fingernail clippers that they've got somewhere. So congratulations, your tax dollars well spent.
And I have friends in law enforcement, and they'll tell you it's changed. They today, the officers that I know that are actually on patrol, they'll tell you it's
watch too.
It's bad. It's really bad. The fear factor now of pulling over a simple speeding ticket, as you well know, since Charlie, is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Well, as you know, here in Denver, I live in Highlands Ranch. What happened with Douglas County.
I live in Castle Pines.
Yeah, well, So right here in a small little village, Sedalia, they have a shootout. A cop pulls over, and the passenger guy, comes out shooting.
Yeah. I mean, that literally happened a mile and a half from my house. Okay, I drive that road twice a day.
Yep. So this is the kind of
Like,
nonsense.
And in that case, you know, a guy pulls a gun and you see the cops open up on him and you go, okay, well, that's what happens when you pull a gun on the cops. But then you see the other instances, which is a guy has no gun, has nothing, and they open up on him, you know, and you're like, well, okay. I mean, you know, you know, it's funny, when I first started driving, my mom taught me. She said, if you ever get pulled over, make sure you have your hands on the steering wheel so that they can see, you know, because they don't know who you are, what you're doing. And I thought, well, that's good. That's a good bit of advice. I guess maybe not everyone is on board with that. It just seems kind of logical to me, but yeah. Again, we have been talking about the intentional dumbing down of society as well. So,
yeah.
You know.
Jeff, you're not saying anything, my friend.
Well, you know, I'm sitting here and I live in the real world. I really do. And I understand everything that you guys are saying, and I see what's going on, and I understand what's going on. And yet at the same time, I'm sitting over thinking, I'm 55 years old. On this esteemed panel, only Wayne has been here more days than I have. And I'm in better shape than I've ever been in my entire life. I'm in better spiritual shape than I've ever been in my entire life. I'm engaged to be married to a beautiful woman 14 years younger than me. And I don't know what's going on with the 25s and 35-year-olds, but I know a 41-year-old woman who spends about half of her time running away from me because I don't have any of these problems with fertility and desire. And my point is that it doesn't matter how bad it gets. Like my friend Derek Bro says, all you can do is prepare your soul, prepare your spirit. I like to respectably add, you can also get your body in order. And yet some bad times, but there's still some good stuff going on. And I think that we get ourselves physically optimized. We get ourselves spiritually optimized. There's still some good living and some good loving in this world. And it's going to help you get to the next one.
There's no doubt. And I think all of us as quote unquote thought leaders in esoterica, we have to even ourselves sometimes focus on not focusing on the dark because there's so much dark. And, you know, to be beacons, again, not to be spiritually violent from a standpoint of like trying to make people aware, but to be beacons by sharing our truth and doing the things that Jeff just said. And that's how we always end our show is like, you know, what's constructive, what's a solution? Because we're obviously bringing up a lot of negative stuff. And there's no question that we can very much paint a picture of this world is ending and that we are coming into the procession of the great change, as Wayne said, and we're at the end of the age. And it's probably all true, but at the same time, it's exactly as Jeff said, to be beacons, we also have to say, well, what are the things that we can do that we can control? And the only thing we can really truly control is ourselves and obviously our immediate families. And we can't even control our immediate families, but we can be good examples to them. You know, so that's, to me, Jeff, you know, that's exactly right. And, you know, as I always say, in everything I do, I always say, be forgiving, even to your enemies. Loving as a state of being, which is like, you know, sacrosanct, hold all life sacrosanct. Don't be stepping on bugs. Don't be killing, you know, animals. Don't be going out shooting animals unless you're, you know, hunting wild caught to eat. And then the last thing is obviously probably the most important, which is having no attachment by being kind and peaceful to other people. Don't expect anything. Just smile at people, shake people's hands every day. You know, those little things, if you can do that stuff consistently, it doesn't matter.
And let me say this before we get out of here. I don't know Chris, I don't know Charlie, but Jay Campbell and Wayne Steiger have had dramatic and profound impacts on my life, the way I live every single day of my life. Jay Campbell is responsible for much of the good in my life. Wayne Steiger is responsible for much of the good in my life. And if me, dummy, ex-Pentecostal preacher, arrogant, you know, knows everything. If I can find help from two great sources like this, I don't care who you are listening. I don't care who you are watching. If I can do it and if I can find it and if I can get myself to spiritual and physical optimization, there's no reason why you can't. And here's two guys, and I'm sure these other two guys can help you too, but here's two gentlemen right here that can help get you on the right path.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. I agree with both of you. We do have to start with ourselves. It's the only thing we can do. And maybe if enough people can just start with a little part of yourself and work outward, that we could change the whole world. And like Jeff said, you really think we can turn it around? Well, it's hard, but do you really think that if enough people can turn themselves around, that we would be able to turn everything around in time? What are your thoughts, as a final thought before we leave from everyone?
Well, I will quote the late great Michael Rupert when he's talking about if you're camping and a bear comes into your campground, you don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to be faster than the slowest camper. So let's make a point to all get faster so that we don't get eaten by the bear. And if your buddy falls down, pick him up too.
That's awesome.
Really my contribution to make sure that the audience that we address is the impartation of knowledge, the ancient knowledge, the wisdom of the time past. And I think Hermes' prophecies are coming to pass, that this is an older heaven for a generation, that the wisdom has been stored up that is now being poured out. And there's wisdom and knowledge, unprecedented access today. Right. Which has just convinced me that we're that close.
Go ahead, Jeff. I agree 100%, Wayne. Well said.
Yes. Thank you all. That was very well said from all of you. And that was an amazing podcast. We're going to have to do it again sometime, guys. That was absolutely awesome. And I thank you all for joining us tonight. It's about that time. So you guys have a great night tonight. And thank you again.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chris.
My pleasure and honor to be here.